Could you just clarify for other people here what mechanism you mean when you talk about swaps?
Where you have an increase, typically where you increase commercial accommodation, office accommodation by, let us say, 1,000 square metres, policy would ask you to produce 1,000 square metres residential. What you can do in practice is take a building that is an office building of, say, 500 square metres, you change it to residential, and you swap between two buildings. So what you end up with is buildings that are not half in half, where people are trying to live on top of an office in the same building, maybe sharing staircases or escape services and cores, and you end up with very attractive residential buildings and very attractive commercial buildings, rather than what I call half-in-half buildings that have a lot of problems for both types of occupier, the residential occupier and the commercial occupier. And you can do that without undermining the mixed-use character of the city, which is often stated to be the main concern.
And would you suggest any criteria to the swaps to control them?
I don't think you need to, because you've worked your policy Q1-3. You have your criteria, and I think it's worked very well. And I think what puzzles me in a way is why you don't actually encourage it a bit more, rather than making the where appropriate and practical hurdle. So you have to prove the case first in order to get to the outcome. I think if people could come forward with an outcome that is demonstrably better, why can that not be, as it were, the first choice of volition, in effect?
So you're suggesting even before Roman point 1 that would be on equal standing with the on-site provision?
I think you've got, yes, I mean, there's an awful lot of wording you have already about achieving better outcomes, and the truth is one can do it. And in fact, Councillor Moss chaired a committee where we went through both iterations, and the first application ended up with a policy compliance scheme, but in all honesty, commercially, a very unattractive scheme that, in fact, I'm not sure would ever have even been implemented. And we actually came back and we did an off-site solution that produced more housing. It produced affordable housing that would never have been produced at all under the first option. We ended up with a far better solution. And my question is, actually, why couldn't we have done that the first time? Because we would have all done better out of it. So
would that be your criteria, that it offers a better solution and or
yes,
increased affordable housing? Or
better outcomes. So I can specify what better outcomes are, but we can do that separately. But I think that these things can be made to work very effectively from everybody's point of view.
Okay, thank you.
If I can just amplify the point that Hugh made. If there is more transparency and a clearer and more certain shared framework of understanding about this subject between the council and developers, then it becomes possible to start becoming a lot more strategic in the way you go about, for instance, securing land. Now, at the moment, we are able to acquire small infill sites in Westminster at a price which historically, certainly over the last 5-7 years, is extremely low. We've done a first site at Fermoy Road. If we knew that there was more enthusiasm behind a more predictable approach towards this subject, we could go out and buy 6, 7, 8 sites across Westminster whilst values are low. So we could go and front-end an awful lot of affordable housing that otherwise may certainly take a lot longer to have delivered within Westminster, which I think is an important consideration for you, because it's such an expensive place for us to acquire land in. And empirically, the point that Hugh made about the quality of buildings, we have just put into the system a proposal for a scheme which is a code level 4 residential development of 33 units. I think it'll be Westminster's first code level 4 building if it goes through the system. That's a level of quality in northeast of the Harrow Road which we would never be able without an implicit credit agreement, which we could not propose otherwise.
Okay, I just wanted to comment on your comment. A lot of the policy approaches that you've put forward, I mean, particularly in terms of taking a strategic approach as a company, seem to relate to that intermediate product being delivered by your company. Obviously, that wouldn't be the policy approach. It would be an intermediate product delivered by an RSL. So I'm not sure about the relationship with the strategic land purchase.
I'm not sure that's... I hope I've misunderstood you. There should not be a presumption against private developers delivering PPS3 compliant, 100% affordable intermediate housing. Intermediate housing is capable of being delivered by the private sector and not just by RSLs. And indeed, we spent a lot of time, both with the Conservatives and with the Labour Party in the last couple of years, to stress this point, that just because something is not receiving public subsidy doesn't mean that it's not affordable housing.
I wasn't saying public subsidy. I was saying
so
a landlord that delivers... what I'm saying is Pocket wouldn't necessarily be delivering the intermediate housing.
Absolutely not. We'd welcome lots of competition. As far as I'm concerned, this is something which plays as effectively for the public sector providers as well as the private sector providers.
I think what I'm asking is the relationship between that, and you were saying that it would enable to take a strategic approach in terms of being able to purchase land.
Yes.
That's where I couldn't make the connection, because I'm not sure Pocket's purchasing of land would be relevant to the delivery of this policy approach if it went forward, because it may not necessarily be Pocket delivering the product, the intermediate housing product that the policy would deliver. I think that's what I'm trying to understand.
Well, it's a free market. You know, the point is, if the policy is encouraging, then whether it's Pocket or somebody else can go out and buy small sites and propose 100% intermediate housing developments of a level and quality which are far beyond anything that we would normally be able to afford as a result of having a more predictable system in place.
And then offer them to other private developments as meeting their mixed-use policy requirements. Is that my understanding?
Yes. I mean, at the moment, as you know, we have a joint venture with Land Securities, which is very much in its infancy. But you know, that's very much tied to Land Securities, but there's no reason why we couldn't be doing it for other large developers as well.
Thank you. Yes.
Councillor Holmes. Oh, sorry.
Thank you. Sorry, I simply wanted to echo the point that Hugh made about 5 minutes ago now regarding mixed uses. And I think there's sometimes the suspicion that the only benefit of moving to a priority that considers land swaps and off-site solutions is a benefit to the developer. But clearly the benefit is a benefit to the council and a benefit to strategic planning policies, in that it doesn't compromise the quality of the commercial space, which in itself within the CAZ is a key strategic planning consideration. And perhaps more importantly for the City Council, it provides better residential outcomes. And I too have negotiated schemes where, in all honesty, the quality of what has been produced is suboptimal and not as good as it might have been had we been able to sit down and discuss an alternative option.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, Councillor Holmes, I do hear what's being said, and I do think that there needs to be some practical solutions sometimes, but I would hate, as a councillor, to feel that there is any part of our city that becomes a no-go area for residents, because I think that's part of the joy of London and of Westminster particularly, and makes it unique, is that in every part of our city, and I represent St James's ward, which is a very mixed ward, and part of the joy is finding that there are residents in all these kind of amazing areas, in Covent Garden, in central St James's, around, you know, Westminster Abbey, wherever, you know, whatever part of the city we go in, there are residents living. And I would hate us to have a policy that starts directing all new residential building outside of these, you know, central areas. Because I think it's very important for the success of our city that we do encourage residents in every part of it.
Okay, thank you.
So if I could just respond to that, what I was suggesting was that the council is much clearer in directing the traffic, as it were, on this subject. And I see no reason why the council couldn't say all social housing that's provided off-site has to be provided within the CAS. That would meet your concern about mixed and balanced communities in places like Covent Garden. But it seems to me actually a matter of good policy to try and encourage intermediate housing in areas which are quite deprived. And therefore, I think you could be quite clear in terms of that and say, look, you know, intermediate housing outside of the CAS at an escalator of, you know, 2 times the floor space that we would otherwise get on site. That's clear. We can all manage that.